Welcome to our biblical analysis of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. My name is Maggie Touye, and here with me I have my brother Tyler Touye, who is a published author, and I'm going to get his thoughts and opinions and applications on the book. So, Tyler, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Like she said, my name's Tyler. I am her older brother. I am a published poet, hoping to be an author soon with a book that I'm hoping to have published before the end of the year. I'm a big book nerd. I love all sorts of books. I especially love the classics. Frankenstein is one of my favorites. I've also read books like Brave New World, 1984, Atlas Shrugged, The Picture of Dorian Gray, The Great Gatsby, many of which I've discussed with her just for fun over the past couple of years. So I'm very excited to add my thoughts on Frankenstein to help her out with her project today.
Great. So, first thing I want to just address is, as an author, like you know what it takes to write and to publish and such. What are your thoughts on kind of the technical aspects of the novel, like Mary Shelley's world-building abilities, her diction, those kinds of things? How do you feel about that when you read it?
Sure. I think that Shelley is a very well-rounded author. I think that she uses a great use of the framing of the novel, especially like having it all in the back of your mind. Like, obviously everyone's paying attention to Victor's narrative, but you have in the back of your mind the expectation. These are all exchanges that Robert is recording down and sending back to his sister in the form of a letter. So like, it gives that story within a story feel to it, but it still allows you to get lost in the narrative of Victor, where like sometimes you get to the end of the book and you're like, oh wait, that's right, we're on a ship going through the Arctic right now.
Absolutely.
So she does a good job of that. In terms of actually like building the world, she does a very good job of portraying what is like a light, happy part of the world and of history as something that is very dark and very dreadful. And a lot of that comes through just exploring it through Victor's mindset, because he is a very neurotic, slightly depressed, and then eventually very, very depressed person. So everything that normal people like maybe his friend Henry see, and it's just like it's the normal world for them, her skill at portraying the world as dark and dreary through his eyes really contributes to the overall sense of gloom of the novel.
So one of the other sources that I was using when I was researching, kind of coming up with these questions, is a Google Scholar source. It's titled The Modern God, Biblical Allusions in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And this author recognizes three, or at least they talk about three specific allusions to the Bible that can be seen. When I was reading the article, this kind of goes back to when you were talking about Victor as being God to the monster. The author of the article wrote, quote, "Frankenstein comes to be seen as a monstrous inversion of the biblical God, who is said to care for his creatures even if he is also capable of punishing them."
Yes.
And that just kind of stuck with me, because it was like, yeah, absolutely. Victor is the complete opposite of who the biblical God is represented to be.
Victor is really what happens when we try to find gods in other things. It's like we get Victor, who is not a good God and who does not love his child. Like that's what happens when we worship things that aren't God as God.
Yeah. So this article it made three allusions. I really want to talk about, because I really found it interesting and honestly didn't even make the connection myself the first time, is a connection to Job and Job's kind of despair and self-curse.
Yes.
In Job chapters 1 through 4, when he loses everything and the Lord allows him to be tested and allows all these things to be taken away from him, Job's response after some time is like, "Cursed today I was born. Better is the one who's never been born and has never seen the light of day. Better is those who are dead than me."
Yes.
You know, and like thinking about that and connecting it back to Victor, who like after he creates this monster, creates life, he's like, "Oh, woe is me, like I'm the worst person ever, like the monster's the worst thing ever, I'm the worst person ever for creating this." So I just wanted to ask your opinion on that, because I found that really interesting and I wanted to hear your thoughts.
I would view it similar to how you mentioned of like Victor being seen as God, but in an inversion, whereas we like the traditional Christian understanding is a good God who can love but also rebuke his children. Victor being a poor substitute for that, being an unrighteous God who does not have the best interests at heart, but is a more capricious, controlling type of person. I would say that it's almost the same with Job, because it's like you have Job, who the text is explicit, hasn't necessarily done a specific thing to deserve all the trial and awful things that come upon him. It is specifically God allowing Satan to go and do these things as a test of his faith. So God commends Job in his sight, but then allows for the test to come. Whereas Victor is someone who it's like his Job experience is fully justified and deserved.
Yeah.
Because he has committed a grave sin. He has taken upon himself the powers of God. And as a result, he has been chastised for it. Fine. You want to try and make life and be God to it and have it owe you all the things that it should actually owe me, that you also actually owe me? Fine. I'll let you do that. Romans 1 says that he gives people over to the darkened spirits and sins of their minds. He gives them over to their foolish thinking. So he's like, fine, if you want to play in that sandbox, I'll give you the tools, but don't come crying to me when you get sand in your eyes. But honestly, I even see, over and against that article, a closer mirror to Job would be the monster. Because the monster, at least in its infancy, if you can call it that, is innocent, like Job is. The monster hasn't done anything to deserve the discrimination that it endures, the horror that people instinctively have when they see it and react to it, and just this, oh my gosh, what is this abomination of nature? Like, the monster can't control the circumstances into which he's been brought. And what's interesting is that Job is the same way. Both of them have a complaint to bring against God. Both of them go to their respective God and say, why have you made me in this situation? The error of the monster, though, is that he asks for the right thing of the wrong God. He asks Victor to give him what only God truly can give him. Job, people ask the question, how can Job not be sinning when he's bringing all of this? He's railing against God. God, why? God, how could you let me happen to this? And the reason it's not sin is because he brings it to God rather than against God. Yeah. He goes to God like a child, having a tantrum to Dad and saying, why, Dad? Why can't I? Why can't I? Rather than going and bad-talking Dad to all of his friends. Yeah. And God is willing in that to be like, hey, listen, I can't necessarily give you the answers, but I can give you a hug. I can bring you in, and like we can fix this. I can put this at ease. If you are willing to admit and accept that there are things that I understand that you don't, then I can give you comfort in the middle of this, and I can bring you out of it if I brought you into it. The monster doesn't have a God like that. The monster has a God who actively flees from him, who would like to have nothing to do to him once he finds out that he can't control him, who wants to destroy him as an abomination of nature, even though he's made him as such an abomination of nature. So it's a very interesting inversion of the Job story on both their counts, because you have a Job who is deserving of the desolation that's been brought against him, and then you have a Job who's not deserving, like the real Job, but reacts the wrong way in his undeserved trial.
Yeah. Okay, I want to have one more question that I do want to ask. So I think that one of the main morals of the novel, at least that I came away with, is that, and which is something that you learn as like a little kid, but like really it's true, like actions have consequences. They can be positive or negative, but regardless they have consequences that have the potential to completely alter the trajectory of your life.
Yes.
So how can we put that in a biblical lens and then apply that moral to the rest of our lives?
I would say that it's like, you recognize, obviously not all of our sins are so immediate as a giant 6-8 foot tall muscled being coming to strangle all of your loved ones.
Right.
But like, just because your sin isn't physical doesn't mean that it can't still strangle people over time.
Yeah.
It chokes you and it chokes others. If you resent someone, that festers inside of you. That's the monster saying, give me a little bit more. Just give me one more thing and I'll be satisfied. And you bring it. Fine, one more thing and I'll be satisfied. And you bring it. One more thing. Over and over and over and over and over. What we need to do as people is we need to, unlike the monster, we need to be satisfied. And we're in our straits, no matter if they're good or bad. And obviously that can only come from submission to God. So if you're not, that's a first step. But on the other hand, we also need to recognize as Victor, you can't bargain with sin.
Yeah.
You cannot, there is no deal you can strike. Like, I commend Victor for not wanting to make the woman, for not wanting to make the female creature. Because from a metaphorical standpoint, it's like, don't let sin become more perverse in your life just because it says, oh, and then I'll leave you alone. Because of course it won't. It'll never leave you alone. It'll never be satisfied. It's hungry, it wants to eat you because otherwise it'd have to eat itself. So make it eat itself, deny it its food so that it starves to death, and that way it won't have any foothold over you. You will be able to see it and you'll maybe pity it, but beyond that, hey, I can't help you. Go bother somebody else.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it was a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Is there any closing thoughts you'd like to add? Anything?
I really love Frankenstein as a novel. It's one of my favorites. If you like works like it, any of the ones that I mentioned at the top of the show that are kind of like philosophical novels, maybe not all of them horror, but stuff like Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, 1984, or Brave New World by Orwell and Huxley, respectively. The Great Gatsby, which is less philosophical but still a great book. I credit it as the book that really got me and my sister talking about literature, which I am forever going to be grateful towards it for. Go read some of those books. If you are a book person, maybe when my book comes out later this year, you can give it a look.
I was going to say, you have a novel on Moses coming out later this year, don't you?
Yes, I do. It is a novelization of the life of Moses. I believe that the title I settled on is Face to Face, the Story of Moses. So it's supposed to be coming out before Christmas of this year, hopefully speaking. So looking forward to that. If you want to support me in that sort of way, you can. Obviously my poetry book as well, if you're a poet nerd like I have become. But I would say just thank you for having me. I'm glad